Imagine being born into a world where your destiny was sealed before you even took your first breath, where marriage wasn't about love, but about bloodlines, where your husband might also be your cousin, uncle, or even your brother. This isn't a twisted fantasy. This was reality for many royal women, trapped in dynasties that gambled everything, even their children's lives, for the illusion of purity and power. Today, we're uncovering the tragic and often shocking stories of the most inbred women in history. From queens to forgotten princesses, each one carries a legacy of ambition, isolation, and irreversible consequences. And it all starts with a Habsburg no one talks about. Number 1. Maria Antonia of Austria. She was royalty, but her bloodline read more like a maze than a family tree. Maria Antonia was born into the infamous Habsburg dynasty, but even by their standards, her genetics were extreme. Her ancestry wasn't just tangled, it was almost circular. Generations of repeated cousin and sibling marriages created a staggering level of genetic similarity. In fact, her inbreeding coefficient was so high, it rivaled that of a child born to full siblings. Let that sink in. While her infamous uncle, Charles II of Spain, often takes the spotlight as the symbol of royal inbreeding, Maria Antonia may have quietly surpassed him. She remains a largely forgotten figure, but biologically she was the pinnacle of Habsburg excess. A woman both noble and doomed, shaped by centuries of impossible choices. Number 2. Maria I of Portugal. Some called her the pious, others the mad. But Maria's story is better described as devastating. Born in 1734 into the Iberian royal houses of Portugal and Spain, Maria was the product of centuries of intermarriage. Her parents were first cousins, the 16th such union between their royal lines. But the pressure didn't stop with her birth. As queen, she was expected to uphold tradition, and that meant marrying her own uncle. The cost? Half her children died in infancy. Her own mental health slowly collapsed until she was deemed unfit to rule. Her reign ended not with rebellion or war, but with silence. A queen broken not by politics, but by the invisible chains of her ancestry. Number 3. Isabella II of Spain. Born into a throne and a tangle of bloodlines, Isabella II's story is royal on the surface, but tragic underneath. Her father, desperate for a male heir, finally accepted her as his successor. But behind the public relief was a private concern. Her health, and that of her sister, seemed fragile from the beginning. The reason? She was the child of an uncle-niece marriage. Even more shocking, on one side of her family tree, her grandparents were also her great-grandparents on the other. At just 16, she was married off to her double second cousin. 11 pregnancies followed, only 5 children survived infancy. And whispers suggest that none of those 5 were her husbands. A man rumoured to have little interest in women at all. Her reign ended in exile. Her legacy? A kingdom shaken by instability and a life shaped by generations of genetic shortcuts. Number 4. Marie Louise of Austria. She was born into Europe's most notorious dynasty, and then married into its most ambitious. Marie Louise's parents were double first cousins. That means both sets of her grandparents were the same. It's a level of inbreeding that modern scientists compare to highly isolated animal populations. She was the eldest of 12 siblings. Only 7 made it to adulthood. At 18, she was handed over in marriage to Napoleon Bonaparte, her father's enemy, France's conqueror. It was a political arrangement, pure and cold, designed to secure peace and produce an heir. She did her part. But behind the titles and ceremonies was a young woman, born into a shrinking gene pool, used as a pawn in one empire's attempt to control another. And history, as always, forgot the cost she paid. Number 5, Marie Louise Élisabeth d'Orléans. Her life read like a French tragedy. All velvet, candlelight, and slow unraveling. Born into the French royal elite, Marie Louise was the product of a deeply uneasy match. Her father, the Duke of Orleans, was forced to marry his own cousin, the illegitimate daughter of Louis XIV. It was a union made for politics, not love, and Marie Louise was its most vulnerable outcome. She was married off to another cousin, Prince Charles of Berry. The result? 3 children. None survived infancy. Some blamed fate, others blamed blood. But perhaps most heartbreaking is how Marie Louise responded. Reports say she turned to alcohol by the age of 14, long before most girls were even married. Was it grief? Rebellion? Or just a way to dull a life she had no control over? Whatever the reason, history remembers her not as a queen or a ruler, but as a young woman buried beneath dynastic pressure, empty cradles, and a wine glass that never seemed to leave her hand. Number 6. Mummies 3A and 3B. They never wore crowns, they never grew old, but their story echoes through the desert tombs of Egypt. Mummies 3A and 3B were infant daughters of the famous Pharaoh Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun, who was also his half-sister. Born around 1300 BCE, the 2 girls were either stillborn or died shortly after birth. Their mummified remains tell a chilling story. Deformities, fragility, and the final toll of generations of sibling marriage within Egypt's ruling house. Tutankhamun himself was the product of incest. By the time his daughters were conceived, the royal bloodline was so genetically narrow there was almost no room left to breathe. They were born to gods and buried as warnings. Number 7. Cleopatra II Philopator. Forget the Cleopatra. Hollywood loves. Cleopatra II was no seductress in gold. She was the genetic climax of the Ptolemaic dynasty's obsession with purity. She married her 2 brothers, Ptolemy VI and later Ptolemy VIII, showcasing just how far the Ptolemaic dynasty went to preserve royal bloodlines. She ruled Egypt in her own right, but her bloodline was Greek-Macedonian, a dynasty that had kept itself sealed off for centuries by marrying brother to sister, uncle to niece, again and again. Cleopatra II's siblings married each other, and she too was married into the same loop of blood. She wasn't just royal, she was the living embodiment of dynastic control taken to its biological extreme. Powerful, yes, but weighed down by a lineage that had closed every door to the outside world. Her name may be majestic, but her story is claustrophobic. Number 8. Joanna of Castile. They called her La Loca, the Mad Queen. But Joanna's story isn't just about madness. It's about what happens when generations of royal bloodlines are folded back on themselves. Born in 1479, Joanna was the daughter of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, rulers celebrated for uniting Spain, but also for being second cousins. Their own family trees were already tangled with generations of cousin marriages, common in Iberian nobility. When Joanna married Philip the Handsome of the Habsburgs, another dynasty infamous for inbreeding, the genetic pressure only increased. Her children would carry the seeds of what would eventually destroy the Habsburg line. But Joanna herself was the first clear warning. By her mid-20s, Joanna showed signs of severe emotional instability. After Philip's death, she reportedly refused to bury his body, traveling with the coffin and speaking to it as if he was still alive. She spent the last 5 decades of her life imprisoned in a convent, labeled insane. Modern historians believe her mental illness may have had a genetic component, the result of repeated inbreeding between royal cousins over generations. Joanna wasn't just the tragic widow of a Habsburg, she was the first casualty of a genetic experiment disguised as empire building. Number 9. Princess Alexia of Greece. Not every royal tragedy happened centuries ago. Some wore designer gowns and smiled for modern cameras. Princess Alexia, born in 1965, is living proof that old habits die hard, especially in royal bloodlines. She was the daughter of Queen Anne-Marie of Denmark and King Constantine II of Greece. And while their wedding made headlines as a fairy tale, Their family tree told a different story. They weren't just husband and wife, they were second cousins, and third cousins, twice. Dig a little deeper and you find even more twisted roots. Constantine's great-grandparents were siblings. One of his grandmothers was also the sister of his great-grandfather. Anne-Marie's ancestry brought its own genetic tangle. Together they carried centuries of inbreeding into the modern world and passed that legacy onto their children. Alexia may have grown up with modern technology and world travel, but inside her DNA lived the same closed-circle logic that haunted queens for generations. A modern princess, a timeless trap. And the last, Kimberly Colt. She's not a queen. She never wore a crown. But Kimberly Colt stands as one of the most disturbing examples of modern inbreeding ever recorded. Her story emerged from rural Australia in the early 2000s, when authorities uncovered a secretive family living in isolation, practicing multi-generational incest under cult-like control. Kimberly was one of the children born into that world, and her condition shocked even seasoned investigators. Her identity is protected by a pseudonym, but the impact of her genetics is real, devastating and irreversible. This wasn't about royal pride or preserving a dynasty, it was about silence, isolation and abuse, a modern echo of ancient horrors, proof that the cost of controlling bloodlines still haunts the present. From ancient Egypt to modern Australia, from gilded palaces to rural isolation, one pattern repeats itself. When bloodlines are closed in the name of power, the cost is never just political. It's deeply, painfully human. These women were born into systems designed to preserve empires, not people. They were queens, pawns, daughters, and mothers, all caught in a genetic trap they never asked for. History remembers their crowns, but behind each title is a story of fragility, sacrifice, and lives shaped by choices made generations before them. And though their names are etched into royal scrolls or buried in forgotten tombs, their stories remind us of one chilling truth. When purity becomes a goal, it's often humanity that pays the price.